So, Stacy, thank you so much for joining me today on the You're Not Alone podcast. I'm super excited to have you on. I know that this has definitely been one of those in the making. We've had this scheduled a few times. I've had to reschedule. Big shout out to Jenna. She's the one who sort of coordinated this and connected us. So I'm super grateful to have you here. And I wanted to start off by just kind of giving you the floor to sort of introduce yourself to my audience.
Thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here, and Jenna is amazing. I'll give her a shout out too. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I've been in the mental health field for over 15 years. I myself have obsessive compulsive disorder, and I am now a specialist at NOCD, working to treat that and working with people of all ages to hopefully catch it much earlier. And I also have 2 kids who have been diagnosed with OCD and 3 kids total. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice. I like that. And yeah, I always say anybody with OCD, we're kindred spirits, because if you live with OCD, you know it can be very, very debilitating. It can be very, very challenging. There are some high days, some low days. And really at the onset for me, I was just like, what is going on with my brain? So I'm curious, for you, when did you start to experience OCD-like symptoms?
Sure. Yeah. I tell everybody, I don't remember a time not having it, to be truthful. I was 5 or 6 when my first memories of it are. I didn't know until I was 15 that it had a name. But yeah, I mean, right from the time I was quite little, I was known as a very anxious kid, very shy, very timid. And I just had a lot of thoughts. I had a lot of things going around my brain. And I started off really young, feeling the urge to confess things, anything really. And I just had so many different themes. We could be here all day if I went through them all. But really, that was the first kind of memories are of me feeling like I had to tell my mom every thought that I thought wasn't okay.
That every thought that wasn't okay. Okay. So can you give, because I know like a lot of my audience are people that are either curious in the topic, they want to support somebody, or they themselves are like, do I have OCD? So what was an example of a thought at like 5 or 6 that you were like, okay, I have to confess this to my mom? Because at 5 or 6, that's a really young age to even know sort of right from, quote unquote, right from wrong. This is a good thought. This is a bad thought. I don't even think I have a memory from 5. Like, I don't know if I could pull up a memory from 5. So kudos to you.
And I know the reason it's so easy for me to pinpoint the exact age and things is the house we lived in, because we moved when I was 7. And so anything that happened in that house that I would remember, I was 5 or 6. And so that's how I'm able to remember it so well. But I mean, where to start? As a kid, my grandma had a lot of heart problems. And so I knew that on some level. And I can remember being at her house and I seen an inhaler, which I know now is like, it's an inhaler. Like it's not like a death device or anything too hardcore medication wise. But I distinctly remember thinking that what if I like poisoned her inhaler, and it caused her harm, and like it ate at me, and I was sick. I was like really sick to my stomach, and I couldn't quit thinking about it. And I don't know how long I sat with that before I told my mom. And, you know, of course, they just kind of laugh and they're like, oh, my goodness, it's an inhaler. Like, it's nothing.
Right.
And then later she did pass away at some point. And I remember thinking, like, I probably caused that. So things like that, just a lot of over responsibility kind of things. And then we weren't a religious household growing up. I did become very religious later on in life, but at that time we weren't. And I remember having religious thoughts that, God would be angry if I didn't do things a certain way. And just things like I had to pray a certain prayer and it had to be done just right. It had to be a very specific prayer. And if somebody interrupted or anything like that, then, I had to restart. And it was a lot. It was a lot.
Definitely. And I find that so interesting because everybody that I've ever interviewed that had scrupulosity, they grew up in religious families. And yet that wasn't the case for you at all.
No, in fact, my dad, I believe at the time was an atheist, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I think he was. I don't think he had any beliefs really. I know that my grandma, who was very important to me, she was religious, and I'm sure she must have said some things to me, and that's how I knew about it. Sure. That would be my guess. But yeah, it was interesting for sure. And yeah, there were just a lot of things. I couldn't eat certain foods. I was scared to death of choking. Just lots of things.
No, definitely. I mean, and anybody with OCD knows that it's going to find every which way to provoke anxiety, the intrusive thoughts, morph as you get comfortable with another genre. How did you know what to pray? That's at such a young age. How did you get your hands on some prayers?
I did though. I had it down. And even I shouldn't admit this as a specialist in ERP, but I do still have a very long prayer that I have to do on occasion. Now I will say there are many, many areas that I am improved in. So I think that it's okay that I still have that one. Like I'm not, I feel like I've overcome so many that a couple are going to be there, and that's just radical acceptance.
Yeah, no. And I actually appreciate you saying that, because I think there's like this common misconception that the moment you become a therapist that your life is just figured out. And that's not true at all. No. We are all works in progress. We're all human beings. I mean, as an advocate, people are like, I get DMs sometimes like, Zach, I just want to recover to your level. I'm like, I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
I live with a chronic brain disorder. Like, this is, I mean, maybe I need to do a better job of projecting the truth on social media so that people can see the day to day. But like, there are great days and there are awful days, and then there are days in between.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because I do think that people don't talk about that enough. Like, just because I've done some really good things, I feel like, and I've been able to live a really great life, and I'm really grateful for that, I still struggle. This is not something that has gone away from me.
Right.
Nor do I expect it to. It'd be great if it did, but I don't expect that. And I just know I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm not going to not do life because of it.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key distinctions with people who end up doing the work. Is a big part of that becomes, okay, I'm going to live a values-based life. I'm going to take committed action. Someday, I'm going to accept radical acceptance. I love that term. We'll touch on that here in a little bit. But like, I am going to show up as the best version of myself that I can possibly be today. And I'm going to try to align my life to that. And if occasionally, like for me, there are days where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to knock a few things out, and then the rest of this day is going to be a me day. It's going to be a brain health day. I'm going to watch a movie on the couch. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to work out. I'm going to go on a walk outside. I'm not going to do the traditional American productive society day, which is just I love like
that. Yeah.
And I just that has been a really hard pill to swallow. I think it's because when you grow up in a society, and again, I love America. I'm very grateful I grew up here. So I'm not like burned, like rip the whole thing down. We got to start over. No, like I'm.
No, but there's a lot of pressure, right? Especially if you live with mental illness, Right. I think it's still stigmatized. You're still expected to do everything that everyone else does. And the truth is that some days that's really hard.
It is.
More days than not, it's really hard, I think.
I agree. And I do. So I really do advocate for, I'm a big believer that like your life is always either contracting or expanding, especially with a brain health challenge. So I am an advocate for like, try to push against those barriers within the context of like, this is how much energy I have today. I'm going to really try to do within the confines of what I have today. I'm going to try to give all that I can give today. Now that can change. That doesn't mean, that's kind of why I was huge into personal development in 2014, 15, 16, and even a little bit of 17. But I just found as I started to heal and go on my own journey, and I was reading a ton of psychology books and understanding myself, is like some of this like 1% better every single day mentality can actually be really dangerous and anxiety inducing, because we're just this random organism floating on a rock in the middle of nothingness that goes forever. Our path is not linear. It's up, down, it's a windy road. And I just 1% better. What does that even mean? How are we quantifying that?
Yeah. I mean, it isn't as if with recovery, I don't think there's a destination, right? It's always going. And as long as I'm going forward and hopefully not backward, which doesn't mean I won't have days where I do feel like I'm going backwards, but overall, am I continuing to live a life that I want to live? And am I continuing to find joy in places, and not beating myself up when I have a bad moment, right? Somebody once told me there's no such thing as bad days. And I was like, of course there are. And they're like, no, there's bad moments. And I was like, well, yeah, but they can stack up pretty fast.
So true.
But as long as you're not doing that as much as before, then you're starting to heal,
I agree with that so much. And you said a few things, like the one thing, and I've started to do this a lot in my life, again, in the spirit of being a work in progress. Like I stop now in my day and I ask myself, like, is this thing that I'm doing or this thing that I'm about to do, like, does this make me happy? Or is this just something that I received messaging from a personal development book, somebody in my life, some sort of indirect societal messaging that I received that told me that this is the thing that you do, that successful people do, again, equating success to happiness, right? Versus the other way around, happiness equaling success. What does that actually mean to me? How do I define that? It's been interesting. It's been really interesting. It's been really eye-opening. It's been really fun. I've also found myself caring less about things that I would otherwise cared a lot about before. So I love what you said there. I also like the, as long as you're moving forward, while also noting that sometimes you take a step back. And what I mean by that is like, sometimes we just like plow forward blindly, right? Like we're just like, as long as I'm moving forward, that's all that matters. But maybe you're moving forward in the wrong direction. So when you take a step back, you see like, to use like an analogy, like, okay, I see these two diverging trails in the woods. And I went down this path and I walked about a mile down this trail and realized, okay, wait a second. This isn't the direction I want to go. So maybe you stop and rest. You're like, I need a drink of water. I need a snack. I need to just like recharge because I'm going to go back to go down a different path that's more aligned with, again, what you said, what makes me happy.
I love that. I do. I think, maybe you change trails completely, right?
Well, and I feel like that's what happened to me in 2016. I mean, I was on a trail, Purdue graduate, corporate America, technology, sales, fast paced, blah, 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 wasn't fulfilling. I mean, no, and to anybody who's in tech, like, kudos to you, right? High paying jobs, it's fast paced, especially if you're passionate about it, go for it. But a lot of what I learned, working in corporate for 7-8 years, whatever it was, like, Most people are not passionate. They're doing a job. And look, there's that too in life. But 2016 rerouted me, and I was very much so like, no, this is the trail that I'm supposed to be on, that I want to be on. This is not how my life is supposed to go. And I was hugely in denial. Even after getting my diagnosis, I was like, no, I don't know what this OCD thing is. Like, I didn't even know people could have it. And I was like, I didn't think it was real. The only thing I'd seen was like this like little MTV special. And they did I've like rewatched the episode, and they just did a horrible job with it. It's like, you just made this more, you didn't shine any awareness. You just made this like very, like, you just like solidified the stereotype of somebody with OCD. And I just felt I was in such denial. I was like, I'm not going down this path. And look, if I could get rid of my OCD, would I? Probably. But what's interesting is because of the path that I've been rerouted on, I also now know that if I did get rid of my OCD, that I would no longer have this deep purpose and meaning and fulfillment and passion in helping other people. And I don't know where I would find that. So I'm just kind of like, it's the trade-off is almost worth it to me.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying makes so much sense, because I would not have went into this field had I not had that. There's no way. Like, why would I? Right.
Yeah. You'd be really, like, what is this OCD thing? I don't need the help. You wouldn't understand how to empathize with people.
No. And I mean, honestly, 20 years ago when I finally got treatment, there wasn't what there is today, right? There wasn't a NOCD or something like that where I knew what it was. I actually found out also, it's kind of funny you said MTV. I found out via 2020, which is like an old Dateline kind of show.
Yes.
They spotlighted this story, and I remember it so clearly. It was like this kid who lived in a bathroom. He couldn't leave the bathroom, and just like because of germs and stuff. But again, kind of stereotypical stuff. Mm-hmm. But luckily, my mom recognized that and said, "Oh my gosh, like this is you. Like this is you. You have to see this." And that's how I found out.
That's so amazing. So your mom saw it and was literally like, "Stacy, you have to see this episode."
Yeah. I mean, she had known for a long time, I'm sure, that something wasn't quite right with me, because it was, when you're young, you're not as skilled at hiding symptoms. I think, I don't know if it's right to be proud about it, but the older I got so good at hiding it.
Oh yeah, we all do, because we start to learn like these are the societal norms.
Yeah. But when I was a kid, I was not so stealth, and so she just knew a lot of things that were going on, and when she seen that show, she's like, it has a name, and that really was the beginning. I thank God for that show, because it was the beginning of me starting to get recovery. It would still take many, many years. I had all kinds of wrong treatment and all kinds of wrong medication and things like that. But eventually it led me to somebody who knew ERP. And so, and the right medications, I'm also, it's a brain disorder for me. And so I'm not anti-meds for sure.
No, neither am I. I think they play a part in the whole process.
For sure. And especially, I mean, how do I have two children with it? I mean, I suppose somebody could argue, well, it's environmental, but, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's hard to separate. Both your kids have OCD? Two out of the three do, yeah.
It's genetic. There's a genetic component. I mean, I'm an advocate. I talk to people all over the world, and they'll be like, I listened to your interview, and on back then it was Peace of Mind. They got rolled in with the McLean Center. Liz McInvale is a good friend and absolutely just love her to death. She's doing great work. But we did some interviews a few years back, and those have kind of circulated around the internet. And people from Brazil, they speak Portuguese. People from the Middle East, speak Arabic. And then obviously you've got New Zealand, you've got amazing. Mexico, you've got, and they're like, I mean, these people were from different cultures. We speak different languages, and yet my exact thoughts are they're happening in the exact same way for them.
Yes. Yes.
It's
I think
genetic.
that's so important. No. And I tell people a lot, I say, this isn't a thought problem, right? Like everybody has these thoughts, but what happens with you when you have OCD is it gets stuck because you want to know why. You want to give it meaning. Why do I have this thought, right? And the truth is, we don't know, right? Probably because it's something you care a lot about, because OCD is kind of mean and he comes at you. But
it picks on what you care about.
It does. It really does. And so, but I think that's really important. Yeah. That no matter what culture or what type of society you grow up in, it does tend to latch onto taboo things or things that are bothersome to the person. So I think that's important.
It is, and I'll never forget it, because I was having sexual orientation intrusive thoughts. That was the first genre, of course, as we know.
Yeah,
OCD loves to jump, but that was my starting thoughts. And I always kind of think to myself, gosh, I'm so thankful it was that and not pedophilia intrusive thoughts, because I don't know if I would have known what the hell. I mean, I already didn't know what the hell was going on. So I to anybody going through it, just understand that pedophilia intrusive thoughts are a part of that spectrum. Okay. But I distinctly remember reading an article written by a gay man having intrusive thoughts about being straight. And I was like, this is unreal.
Yeah.
That was sort of the light bulb moment for me. And I don't know his name. To this day, I don't think I could find the article, but I remember I just started crying. I was actually at the office, but I was I had locked myself in like one of the quiet rooms, and I was compulsively researching. Of course, I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I was just engaging in compulsion, searching for answers. But I remember when I found that article and I read it, I just started bawling, because I was like, how could it was basically, I connected the dots. I was like, I do have OCD. Like, how could this man who is gay be afraid of being straight?
Yeah.
And questioning that, and like,
isn't that amazing when you hear somebody else's story, that it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but it's hard to relate it to yourself.
It is, and stories are so powerful. It's amazing how powerful stories are, and that's why I love having people like yourself on, because this is what sets people on their path.
I love that. Yeah, no, like I said, this would have been the 90s, primarily 80s, 90s when I was growing up. I'm kind of old that way, but I love that. I love that, because
you've seen what it was and what it's becoming, which has to be really inspiring, right?
It is. But I was so hungry to find stories like mine. That's the thing. I remember that being the most important thing. I don't think I've ever told this story, but I remember asking my therapist, and I'm in a rural area, so it's not like a big, and I said, are there others? And they're like, what do you mean, are there others? And I'm like, well, like other people with these things. And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's why it's a disorder. And I said, well, can I meet someone? And he actually, to his credit, somehow HIPAA approved, was able to introduce me to someone with it. And just knowing there was one other person out there, it changed. It was a game changer. And so today, when I'm working with NOCD, I'm always thinking, how do we get that out there, that you're not alone, and that your story matters? Because that is what brings people in. I think you're right. I think it's that, knowing that, oh my gosh, somebody else has had something, maybe even worse, right? In my mind,
Absolutely. And you're giving me chills, because anyone who's gone on their journey remembers that moment, because everybody thinks that they're alone, right? It's like, and that's why the title of my book is You're Not Alone.
Yeah.
I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only person on the face of the planet dealing with these thoughts, dealing with these emotions. And then I remember I was I go on my path, hit my rock bottom. I get diagnosed. I'm in denial about the whole thing, but I'm starting to do ERP. I'm kind of like, I'm starting to buy in. I'm right at the beginning though, but I'm learning about OCD. And I remember I looked down at my colleague's desk at work, and she had a fake cockroach on her desk. And something, I'm giving myself chills right now. Something clicked, because it was like, who puts a cockroach on their desk? Like a fake, who does that at work? Like, we're in corporate technology America. Like, it's cubicle central in here.
I love it. I love it.
Who freaking puts a cockroach on their desk? And I was literally like, I think she has OCD. And we were friends. So I waited, and I kind of strategically pulled her off to the side, and I was like, hey, like, that cockroach on your desk, like, you don't happen to have OCD, do you? And I'll never forget it. She was like, yeah, I do. And we ended up going on like an hour-long walk. And it was just like, I just spilled my guts, just everything. And it was such a weight lifted off my shoulders. I can picture the day perfectly, because it was, to your point, like, are there others? It was the first day where I was like, yeah, there are others. There are other people that I like going through this, real people that like I look up.
So many.
And like, I always had admired her. She was so committed to her work, and she cared so much more about the company than I did. And I was like, that was a whole other thing. Like, why am I not passionate about this? And of course, years later, the reason why is because this is really what I care about. But yeah, it was just such a light bulb moment.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think if people only knew, and if people only, one of the kicks I've been on lately with working with people has been, we've always come across a lot of shame and guilt tied to the thoughts. And one of the things I feel myself wanting to scream to them is, you have no idea the thoughts I've heard people say. And they're just that. They're just thoughts. They don't have to have any meaning. And I tell people, I'm not going to judge it at all, because I have no judgments, because it's not you. It's right. A thought. But if they could only hear what I've heard, the thousands of stories of people and their thoughts, unfortunately, they'll have to take my word for it. But yeah, you're not alone.
It is that type of messaging, though, over and over again, that does eventually start to sink in. Because it really is true. Like, the first time I heard somebody tell me, like, your thoughts are just thoughts, I was like, no, they're not.
Shut up. You don't know.
Shut up. Your thoughts are real. They matter. They're important.
Yeah.
And it's like all the thought management and controlling your thoughts. And again, things that they teach in personal development, like replace a negative thought with a positive thought. It's okay, well, that's, especially with OCD, that's one real quick way to just
you don't want to give them the attention at all, right? You don't want to, but you're right. That's the first line of treatment, unfortunately. You go in and you start talking about thoughts with a talk therapist or a CBT therapist, a regular one, because ERP is a form of CBT, of course. But, you start talking about thoughts, and they're like, oh, we got to challenge them. These are thinking errors. But the person with OCD knows that. On a logical level, 99% of them know. There's a few that don't have that insight, but the majority know this is not logical. And I still feel compelled. What if there's that 0.001 chance that this might be something different, and I need to do something? Right.
And I need to know. I need that certainty.
So challenging it isn't going to do anything other than make you really more focused on it. Right. You try not to think about it. You're engaging it. And then it just gets bigger and bigger.
Definitely. And it's interesting that you bring that up. And I'm glad that you did around CBT, because I do believe that CBT has a place.
Definitely.
I love kind of that. Well, why this? Why does that bother you? And you get down to the root of something, and you can kind of shine a light on it. There's a place for that.
Yes.
But with what we're talking about, especially specifically with OCD, although I do believe that this sort of marrying the school of traditional CBT, a little bit of ERP, a little bit of ACT, a little acceptance and commitment therapy. Gosh, if you take those skills, give them to anybody, any human being that ever existed, forget about even having OCD, you have a more evolved human that is able to, that has a set of tools to regulate their emotions, to understand how to live and flow with uncomfortable thoughts, to learn to live with uncertainty, to, at times when necessary, dig into the why, which is more of the CBT side. Why is this bothering me? Well, I can follow this downward arrow technique, starting with my initial thought, and what I thought was really bothering me, underneath that is this fear-based belief system that's driving a lot of my actions. Gosh, could you imagine if we had a society like that?
Yeah, make it mandatory.
Teach them in school.
Should say, I also did a lot of CBT and found it very helpful. So I definitely want to make that clear too. There is definitely times where I use that in my own life, right? And it's hard. Sometimes it's so hard to know, like, should I ERP this one, or do I really need to, and I think that's something you find as you go through it, right? You figure it out.
You definitely do. And I just love that we now have these types of talk therapies at our disposal, because when you were growing up in the 80s and early 90s, I mean, these talk therapies were being developed, right? But they weren't commonplace.
Yeah, I think I seen my first therapist. So my mom seen the 2020 episode when I was 15, which would have been, give me a minute, I got to do some math. That would have been around 1994, 95.
Okay.
And then shortly, maybe within a year, maybe 2 years, I seen my first therapist and psychiatrist, and they didn't have a clue
what was going on.
If I'm being real, they really, and I didn't know enough about it. I would have been 17. I want to say the first psychiatrist put me on 6 meds the first day he met me. I went home, I took them, and it was a complete disaster. And then I took them all back. I remember that very clearly. I took them in a bag back and I said, I don't want these. You can keep them. And then I think I went a couple more years before I reached out again, and another failed attempt. And so I also want to give people hope, like that. Yes, that still happens, right? People go and they get, there are therapists, unfortunately, out there who say, yes, we specialize in OCD, but they don't really know it, and they don't know the right treatment. And I don't think they mean anything bad. Like, I genuinely think they think of it just like anxiety, but it's very different, and it takes a very special treatment and knowledge base to treat it. It isn't just your run-of-the-mill treatment. And I think that's what's hard. I see so many people who come to me who have been misdiagnosed. I had somebody who was diagnosed as schizophrenic, not at all schizophrenic, completely. But, and that's traumatic for someone who then goes through all the treatment for that, only to find out later that that wasn't even the right diagnosis. It's one thing if it is, then, we got to treat it, but it wasn't. And so anyways, I say that to say that, there are a lot of people out there who say they treat it, but make sure if they're not doing ERP and CBT and like you said, ACT combined, they're probably not really specializing in OCD.
Stacy, thank you for saying that. In our community, I think it takes some bravery to step up occasionally and say, yeah, we've gotten a lot better. But there is some truth in that. And look, it's good to look back to and say, okay, we've made progress. Let's start with that, right? Like, there for a minute, I mean, you showed up to a psychiatrist and they wrote you scripts for 6 different medications. Yeah, I mean, in what world ever should that be okay?
And they were heavy hitters. Like, now I know because, I went to school later on and all of that, and I figured it out. But back then I had no clue.
Yeah, and most people don't, because they come in and they want to trust the provider. But that's just how our medical system is set up generally. Like, Western medication, it doesn't, forget the brain. Let's talk about the heart. Let's talk about the body, any other ailment. I mean, we treat symptoms. We don't treat the whole person. And I think what I love about the evolution that's taking place in the brain health space is we are starting to pivot to holistic healing. As an industry, we are saying, okay, we are no longer just going to throw different prescriptions at somebody to treat all these different symptoms. We are going to take a holistic approach. Medication can absolutely play a part in that, but so is talk therapy. So are lifestyle changes. So are mindset shifts. You know, how much do you sleep? Do you meditate? What's your diet look like? All of these different components that treat the whole human.
Yep. I love that, because I do think that is so important and very much overlooked. You're absolutely right. Like what else? There's a time, hopefully this will come off right. There's a time to explore those things, right?
Right.
I think ERP gets a bad rap sometimes that we don't think about any of that stuff, which I totally get.
Yeah.
I think the key is finding, what I always tell people is, okay, the ERP is very specific and we are doing these things. And at the same time, there's a lot more to you than OCD, right? You're not just OCD. You're a person who experiences these symptoms, because that's all the diagnosis is. It's just a bunch of symptoms, but it guides our treatment, right? It guides what we're going to do. Totally. It's our roadmap, so to speak. And so I love that you're saying that you need to really also see that this is a person with real other stuff too. It's hard to separate the two.
It is. And I really think that I started to learn that for myself personally after I started ERP. So like I started to learn how to, first off, I'm exposing myself to intrusive thoughts. And so of course, over time, these intrusive thoughts are becoming less and less. They're holding less power over me. I'm starting to feel that heavy cloud lift, right? The thoughts of suicide are dissipating. The clouds of depression are pulling back. The anxiety is at a much more manageable level. And I'm starting to realize, there are things at work that, like, in addition to just having OCD, like, there are things at work that stress me out.
Yeah.
And when I'm more stressed, I also now am starting to notice a correlation with my symptoms of OCD. So like that is the part where I was like, okay, there's a whole other side to this picture outside of, and again, I'm a huge advocate for ERP. I mean, it's the number one proven treatment, y'all. So for anyone listening to this episode right now, that's what you do for OCD.
It's kind of my jam. Yeah.
Yep. It's sort of Stacy's jam. It's definitely my jam as well. And it's everyone at NOCD, that's what they specialize in. That's what they do. Yes. So there's our NOCD plug right there. But
yes, thank you. I want to make that clear. I am all about ERP, but I also I've seen the benefits of other stuff, and I've done the other therapy as well. And so, I also specialized in children's trauma as well for many years. So, I mean, there's a benefit to anything. I think for me, it's just heartbreaking to see when people are misdiagnosed or mistreated, because those are years, this is going to sound sad, but there are years I can't get back. You can't, and that's nobody's fault per se, but had somebody known what it was, had it been a clearly identified and treated properly, who knows what my life, and again, I'm a big believer in what's meant to be will be. And I do believe to a certain extent, right? And that I'm in this was my calling or my path. And so that being said, I can't say, oh, I wish it hadn't happened, because then I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have this amazing platform. I wouldn't be talking to you, right? I wouldn't. So it's bittersweet, but what I can do is say, if you have a kid who's struggling with some of these things, they're acting a little quirky or off, or telling you, these thoughts constantly, or coming to you and looking for reassurance, maybe you might want to look into this, because you might spare them a lot of heartache later on.
Definitely. And what, for a parent listening right now, what could reassurance look like coming from their child?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think kids are so creative. They will find a way. If you catch on to them, they're going to find another way to sneakily ask you. So like, just anything that seems a little bit off, one of my own kiddos, it was constantly, are you mad? You look mad. Are you mad at me? Just something simple like that, but something that is excessive. For that child, it was just excessive concern about, somebody being mad or upset and that kind of thing. But, it could really be anything. I would ask my mom, just randomly, like, did so-and-so touch that? Like something in the house, because in my mind, so-and-so had gasoline on their hands. And if they had gasoline on their hands, then we're all going to die. But of course, I'm not going to say that to my mom, because even 7-year-old Stacy knows that sounds a little cray-cray. So I would say something like, oh, did dad come in from outside and was he over here into this stuff? And she'd be like, well, no, she's only half paying attention or whatever. She had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
But you do that enough times, and that should sort of be a red flag, like something's up.
I think that's really helpful. I really do. In fact, I just connected a dot with myself, which is funny, because one thing that I always found very fascinating about myself, and I always knew that it was a personality trait, or I thought it was a personality trait, was always worrying about how other people felt. Like,
yes.
I want to make sure everybody's happy. That was always the big one. Like, I want to make sure everybody's
sense of responsibility for everyone else.
Exactly. And I would always also look around and be like, it doesn't seem like other people are as worried about other people's emotions as I am.
They're not. Unless they have OCD. They're probably not. I mean, you can have obviously a conscientious person, but I do really believe, and again, this is just Stacy's own research, so take it for what you will. But out of the hundreds of people I've seen, almost always there is an over conscientiousness and an over sense of responsibility. I very seldom have met someone who has had OCD who doesn't have a really high level of that.
Wow. I just learned something new today. That is fascinating.
And again, that's the Stacy research.
Of course, disclaimers, everyone, disclaimers across the board. Yeah, but that counts for something.
I think so.
You've seen hundreds of people, so
yeah.
Well, and I had read through the research that they found that people with OCD typically tended to exhibit higher levels of sensitivity.
Yes.
That is, children. Especially they were sensitive children, and gosh, I can think back to myself as I was such a sensitive little boy. I really was.
That's my son, totally.
Yeah.
The one with the most severe OCD of the kids, and way oversensitive. I'll tell you kind of a quick story. Is he had come home from school and was telling me all about how he was bullied, and I of course was outraged and upset, and I'm like, well, this can't be. Why is this happening? You're so sweet and kind and blah, blah, blah. And it just happened to be that there was a field trip like the next week. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to chaperone. And so I go on this field trip, and, they're normal kid interactions. They're doing what they're doing. And my son would continually come up to me and say, did you hear that? Did you see what they just did? They're picking on me. And I was like, no, I was like, that's not what happened at all. Like, and even I, who have OCD, but it's different when it's not yourself.
Right. You can see it more clearly.
Yep. Yeah. And I was like, that's not what they're doing. They're trying to get you to play along with them like that. They're just being funny. And he just had no ability to see that, even with me explaining it to him, like, no, that's not what's happening. Like, I could clearly see it wasn't. And he was like, and over the years, we've really worked on it, and he's gotten much better, but he still has tendencies to think the slightest tone of voice change or anything, it's like they're mad, they hate me. It's like, no.
That's so I love that story, because I can even think back to me. I remember as a little boy, and it wasn't until, so when I was growing up, my mom would do play dates. So I have a sister 2 years younger than me. So our play dates inevitably became this like mix of genders, right? Was like, and little, I don't want to generalize, but it felt like back then little girls and little boys sort of played in distinct ways, but I was always playing with girls. So I kind of, as a little kid, sort of grew up like that. But as I got older, I was like, well, I want to hang out with my guy friends.
Yeah.
And at first I was very sensitive to the teasing and the joking around and this and that. And as I got older, I quickly realized, like, no, this is how guys interact with each other. Like, this is like, if they're teasing you, that means that they like you. If it's when it's not that things are like weird. And it just took me a while to learn that, because I think of the combination of some of the play dates early on and then the level of sensitivity.
Yep. That was my first clue with him, is just a high level of sensitivity.
Yep.
And the other thing too, I mean, another Stacy research piece. But this one, actually, I mean, there is some research, a lot of research to sort of back this, but this sense of mistrust of oneself, right? And I find that fascinating. It's something I'm trying to study more of, but not trusting your own feelings or your own memories or your own thoughts. And so that seems to be a very prominent piece of the puzzle with OCD. And so I'm going to be very interested in what much smarter people than I come up with in the years to come about that. But I suspect there is definitely a link and a big one, because what are you doing with all of these things? You're mistrusting yourself, right? You're saying, I don't trust my own opinions or my own beliefs about things. When I would go to my mom, it was because I wasn't trusting that I knew something for sure. There was this memory piece. So I don't know. It just fascinates me.
But I see that again, tying it back to myself. It's funny because I wouldn't describe it as a lack of confidence, because I feel as I've gotten older, especially, that like I know more of like who I am. Like, I feel like in my younger years, and I'm sure that this is pretty common, but again, where does that overlap between OCD and just being like a teenager? But like, not being always sure of who I was or my decisions or this, that, or the other. And I still do find that showing up in adulthood. Yeah. That mistrust around my own decisions, my own feelings, emotions, day to day, sometimes
what
decisions
if it's
that
wrong?
I make.
What if it's not right? What if you can't be certain? Maybe there was a better decision.
And maybe you almost approach the mistrust the same way that you do every other thought. Maybe this was the right thing to do. Maybe it wasn't, but it's what we decided that we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, almost that, like, kind of just shrugging the shoulders to it.
I think you have to. I have often said, you know what? Things have always worked out one way or the other, right? It'll work out. It might not be exactly like it should. I don't know. I'm going to live with the uncertainty of it all.
And again, I mean, you discredited yourself earlier. I think that you're plenty smart. You're dropping nuggets left and right. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Don't let those researchers try to come in and belittle us. We have a part in this too.
They have a lot of fancy stuff out there. I'm actually, I'm working on an article for NOCD right now about mistrust. So it's fresh in my mind. And
that's cool.
I've been reading through a lot of things on it and very scientific things. So I don't want to mess up and say the wrong thing, which is probably a little OCD.
That's okay. Hey, maybe you did, maybe you didn't.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I totally was way off, and some smart doctor person will call me out on it. I don't know.
Well, I certainly hope that they wouldn't, because we are all we are all playing our part in this, and grateful for them too. But hey, I mean, no knock on them, but when we were trusting doctors 20, 30 years ago, they were making mistakes. So we're just, again, it gets back to that journey. We're all on this kind of ebbing and flowing together, right?
Yeah. I'm so excited that there is so much attention being put out there on anxiety and OCD and just all mental health, to be honest. I think we have come so far in even, my lifetime. I can't imagine where we'll be when my kids are, older, hopefully even twice as far and twice as better treatment,
Well, I think that fundamentals are going to be taught in school. So like, I can't see a world in which this stuff doesn't become commonplace. taught at, call it K through 12 in some capacity. Like, I think that that's going to be the first step. And I just think mental health care is just going to become so much more robust as we continue to have these conversations, because it's at the forefront of everything. I think that mental health care is going to be unrecognizable in 100 years from even where we're at now.
Yeah.
Which is super exciting.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited.
Well, Stacy, this has just been an absolute blast. I've learned a lot. This has been super fun. I want to end with a couple questions here. So one being, are there any resources, books, podcasts, websites that you would recommend people check out for those of us who either have a loved one with OCD or actually have OCD ourselves?
Yeah, sure. Of course. At NOCD, we have treatmyocd.com. We have a free downloadable app that is sort of acts like a social media app. I'm actually very involved in their community, answering questions, and it's a great place to hear other people's stories. We also have a blog that I love writing for, and lots of articles, lots of information out there on that. And I also, on my Instagram, it's Stacy Quick Undone. You can check that out. Jenna Overbaugh, of course, is a big one. She sort of got me on the social media bandwagon. I, being my old self that I am, had not had an Instagram before I met Miss Jenna Overbaugh. So I'm giving her a shout out for that.
You're doing great with your IG, by the way, especially for not wanting to be involved with it. You're doing great.
Yeah, no, I joke. I have a 25-year-old daughter who picks on me about it and says, you're not going to get all those followers, Mom. And I said, oh no, you watch. I said, I will get there, because you're chipping away. It might take some time. I said, but I'll get there, because the more people that can at least see they're not alone, that's what's important. And if I can put a funny twist on it, I try, because we got to laugh at some stuff, because otherwise life's too serious. It's already took so much joy. I'm not going to let it take any more. So, amen. Yeah. I appreciate so much you letting me be on your show. I've had a really good time. Yeah, me too. So to kind of close things out, what is one piece of advice you would give someone who is right at the start of their mental health journey? Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's going to be hard, but it's already hard. You're already living a life that is hard. This is hard, but it's a hard with a purpose, if that makes sense. It's not an empty work. You will see results, but it will take time. I didn't get to this place that I am so much better today by not doing some really, really hard things. And in the moment, it feels impossible, but that's the reason why you got to do it. You got to show yourself it's not impossible. It isn't, but your brain has to see that repeatedly. And there are going to be days you don't want to do it, and you're going to have to make a decision. What do I really, really want here? And there'll be days you say, not today. And then there'll be days, hopefully more days than not, where you say, I'm doing it. I'm not letting it steal another moment. Not letting it steal another moment. I love that. Well, Stacy, it was absolutely great having you on. Such a sound piece of advice to end the show on today. You're a wealth of knowledge. You did a great job. I really appreciate having you on. And yeah, just super grateful. So thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much.